necessary. It was overpowering, obnoxious, annoying, and comforting. Sarah turned in the black leather chair to watch the display of lightning. The skyline of downtown Chicago glimmered back at her through the rain. With every book, another fact, another detail, another intense emotion broke through from her own past. She could literally feel the dry dirt under her hand, feel the oppressive darkness. Reliving what had happened to her 25 years ago was terrifying. Necessary, but terrifying. She sat lost in thought for several minutes, idly walking her pen through her fingers. Her adversary was out there, somewhere, still alive, still hunting her. Had he made the association to Chicago yet? After all these years, she was still constantly moving, still working to stay one step ahead of the threat. Her family knew only too well his threat was real. The man would kill her. Had long ago killed her sister. The threat didn't get more basic than that. She had to trust others and ultimately God for her security. There were days her faith wavered under the intense weight of simply enduring that stress. She was learning by necessity how to roll with events, to trust God's ultimate sovereignty. The notepad beside her was filled with doodled sketches of faces. One of these days, her mind was finally going to stop blocking the one image she longed to sketch. She knew she had seen the man. Whatever the consequences of trying to remember, whatever the cost, it was worth paying in order to try to bring justice for her and her sister. She couldn't force the image to appear, no matter how much she longed to do so. She was the only one who still believed it was possible for her to remember it. The police, the FBI, the doctors had given up hope years ago. She fingered a worn photo of her sister Kim that sat by a white rose on her desk. She didn't care what the others thought. Until the killer was caught, Sarah would never give up hope. God was just. She held on to that knowledge and the hope that the day of justice would eventually arrive. Until it did, she carried guilt inside that remained wrapped around her heart. In losing her twin, she'd literally lost part of herself. Turning her attention back to her desk, she debated for a moment whether or not she wanted to do any more work tonight. She didn't. She slipped the pad of paper with her draft of the book chapter into the folder beside her computer keyboard. When it had begun to rain, she turned off her computer, not willing to risk possible damage from a building electrical surge should lightning hit a transformer or even the building itself. As she put the folder away, the framed picture on the corner of her desk caught her attention. Her best friend was getting married. Sarah envied her. She could feel the sense of rebellion rising again. The need to break free of the security blanket around her rose and fell with time. Ellen had freedom and a life. She was getting married to a wonderful man. Sarah longed to one day have that same choice. Without freedom, it wasn't possible, and that hurt. Her dream was being sacrificed with every passing day. She opened her desk drawer, retrieved her purse, then picked up her briefcase. Her office had plush forest green carpet and ivory walls, the furniture European, the bookcases mahogany. This was the office where H.Q. Victor, the internationally known British author, worked. She lifted her raincoat from the stand by the door. With the London fog coat, she even looked British. As she stepped into the outer office, the room lights automatically turned on. They illuminated a massive receptionist area where the walls displayed children's books, 35 of them, by Sarah J. Walsh. Sarah reached back and turned off the interior office lights. There was a second office, 20 feet away, where the name Sarah Walsh had been stenciled in gold on the nameplate. She wrote the children's books there, illustrated them, had fun. The office behind her had no nameplate. When she locked the suite door, an electronic beam triggered behind her, securing the office. Her suite was in the east tower of the business complex, rising 45 stories. The two recently built towers added to the already impressive downtown skyline. Sarah liked the modern building and the shopping available on the ground floor. She disliked the elevator ride, for she didn't like closed spaces, but she considered the view worth the price. The elevator that responded tonight came from 2 floors below. There were 2 connecting walkways between the east and west towers, one on the 6th floor and another in the lobby. She chose the 6th floor concourse tonight, walking through it to the west tower with a confident but fast pace. She was alone in the wide corridor. Travis sometimes accompanied her, but she'd waved off his company tonight and told him to go get dinner. If she needed him, she'd page him. The click of her heels echoed off the marble floor. There was parking under each tower, but if she parked under the tower where she worked, she'd be forced to pull out onto a one-way street no matter which exit she took. It was a pattern someone could observe and predict. Changing her route and time of day across one of the 2 corridors was a better compromise. Hopefully, she could see any danger coming. Adam Black dropped the pen he held onto the white legal pad and got up to walk over to the window, watching the lightning storm flare around the building. He felt like that inside, storming, churning. He'd lost more than his dad. He'd lost his confidant, his best friend. Trying to cope with the grief by drowning himself in work was only adding to the turmoil. The passage in Mark chapter 4 of the storm-tossed sea and Jesus asleep in the boat crossed his mind and drew a smile. What had Jesus said? "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" Appropriate for tonight. He rubbed the back of his neck. His current commercial contracts expired in 3 months. A feeding frenzy was forming. Which ones would he be willing to renew? Which new ones would he consider? What kind of money would it cost for people to get use of his name and image? The tentative dollar figures being passed by his brother-in-law, Jordan, were astronomical. The stack of proposals had been winnowed out, but the remaining pile still threatened to slide onto the floor. All he needed to do was make a decision. God, what should I do? The decisions he made would set his schedule for the next 5 years of his life. If he said yes, he was by default saying no to something else. Was it that he didn't want to make a decision, or that he didn't want to be tied down? It was hard to define what he wanted to accomplish anymore. He was restless. He'd been doing basically the same thing for 3 years, keeping his image in the public eye and building his business. It had become routine. He hated routine. His dad would have laughed and told him that when the work stopped being fun, it was time to find a new line of work. They'd had 8 days together between the first heart attack and his death. 8 good days, despite the pain. Adam sitting at his dad's hospital bedside and talking about everything under the sun. They had both known that time was short. "I'll be walking in glory soon, son," his dad would quip as they ended each evening, never knowing if it would be their last visit, and Adam would squeeze his hand and reply, "When you get there, you can just save me a seat." "I'll save too," his dad would reply with a twinkle in his eye that would make Adam laugh. Adam glanced at the red folder he'd placed between the picture of his father and the glass-encased football on the credenza. No, he wasn't reading the list in the folder again tonight. He already knew it by heart. It was time to go home. Time to feed his dog, if not himself. Sarah decided to take the elevator down to the West Tower parking garage rather than walk the 6 flights. She could grit her teeth for a few flights to save time. She pushed the button to go down and watched the 4 elevators to see which would respond first. The one to her left, coming down from the 10th floor. When it stopped, she reached inside and pushed the garage floor parking button